The mountain air was thin and cold, biting at the exposed skin around Petty Officer Marcus Riggins's eyes. He adjusted his night vision goggles, the world swimming in a ghostly green hue. His team, Abe, Diaz, and Connors, were shadows against darker shadows, moving up the jagged slope of Takurgar Ridge with a silence that felt sacred. Their mission was simple in briefing, complex in execution. Plant surveillance equipment to monitor a key insurgent supply route. It was a soft insert, no engagement expected. The intelligence, beamed from a satellite 1,000 miles above, had declared the route cold. But the mountains of Afghanistan had a way of swallowing intelligence reports and spitting out chaos. As Diaz, the point man, crested a small rock outcropping, the night erupted. The first burst of PKM machine gun fire didn't miss. It tore through Diaz's leg, spinning him to the ground with a choked gasp. The comm shattered. Riggins yelled, "Contact! North Ridge!" as crimson laser beams, invisible to the naked eye, sliced through the darkness, painting them all. The enemy wasn't just present. They were prepared, positioned in a lethal crossfire from higher ground. Riggins dragged Diaz behind a crumbling rock wall, the only scant cover. Abe and Connors returned fire, their suppressed rifles making sharp coughing sounds. The enemy's weapons roared, unsuppressed, their muzzle flashes like angry orange eyes blinking across the mountainside. "We're compromised. Request immediate QRF." Riggins barked into his radio, using the code for Quick Reaction Force. The response from the Tactical Operations Center, TOC, was calm, almost disinterested. "Stand by, Anvil 1. Minutes stretched, each one measured in breaths and bullets. Abe took a round that grazed his helmet, knocking him senseless for a terrifying 3 seconds. The insurgents, smelling blood, began to flank. Riggins called again, his voice tighter. "Anvil 1, we are pinned, taking effective fire from 3 sides. One man critical, need extraction now." The TOC came back, a different voice now. "Anvil 1, be advised, weather's closing in. Possible delay." A coldness seeped into Riggins that had nothing to do with the altitude. A delay. Here was a death sentence. He could see the lights of their forward operating base, a distant glow in the valley, a world away. Hundreds of miles to the south, in a dimly lit trailer at an airbase in Kandahar, Major Tom Buzzer buzzed his thumb over a worn joystick. The A-10C Thunderbolt II simulator hummed around him. On his screen, digital tanks exploded satisfyingly. It was a training module, a way to keep sharp during the endless downtime of a deployment that had so far been remarkably quiet. The A-10, his Warthog, was a plane built for one brutal purpose: close air support. It was a flying tank killer, its nose dominated by a massive 7-barrel Gu-8 Avenger cannon that fired depleted uranium slugs the size of soda bottles. But tonight, its only action was in a video game. Buzzer was an oddity in the modern Air Force. In an era of sleek, fast, multi-role fighters and stealth bombers, he was a devotee of the slow, ugly, purpose-built machine. He believed in the mantra written in the hearts of every A-10 pilot: protect the guy on the ground. He was finishing his simulated run when the door to the trailer opened. A young airman leaned in. "Major, you're on alert standby. Real-world chatter is picking up in the east." Back on the ridge, the delay had become a nightmare. A mortar round, shockingly accurate, exploded 20 yards from their position. Shrapnel whistled through the air. Connors cried out, a piece of hot metal buried in his shoulder. The insurgents were now close enough that Riggins could hear their shouted commands. They were being hunted. He got on the satellite radio, the secure line. "Anvil 1 to any station. We are in heavy contact, requesting any available air support or extraction. Our position is being overrun." The response that crackled back was not from the TOC. It was from a duty officer at Regional Command. "Anvil 1, your mission profile is classified as low-priority reconnaissance. Assets are currently tasked with higher priority operations. Maintain position and await further instructions." "Maintain position," Abe snarled, popping up to fire a burst. "We're going to maintain a position 6 feet under." Riggins felt a hollow pit open in his stomach. They weren't delayed. They were being written off. The mission had gone bad, and someone, somewhere, had decided 4 SEALs were an acceptable loss to avoid a larger, politically messy confrontation. The betrayal was as precise as a sniper's bullet. Diaz was going pale from blood loss. Connors was struggling to use his weapon. They were down to their last magazines. Riggins made a decision. He switched his radio to an open, guard frequency, an emergency channel meant for any friendly aircraft to hear. It was a breach of protocol, a scream into the void. Any aircraft, any coalition aircraft, this is Anvil 1 on guard. We are USSOF, pinned, and die on to Korgar. Grid is 42S. He repeated the coordinates, his voice raw. We are being abandoned. Request immediate help. Anyone. In the Kandahar trailer, Buzzer was listening to the operational frequency chatter on a side speaker, waiting for his possible call. The open guard channel was on another speaker, usually silent. Suddenly, it erupted with static and a desperate, breaking voice. Anvil 1, pinned and dying, being abandoned. Buzzer froze. He'd heard fear in pilots' voices, in controllers' voices, but this was different. This was the sound of a man who knew the cavalry wasn't coming. He lunged for a map, his fingers tracing the coordinates. To Korgar, a notorious ridge, a graveyard. He saw no friendly aircraft assigned anywhere near it. The official ops channel was silent about it. It was as if the call didn't exist. He called the combat operations desk. Ops, this is Hammer 0 to 1. I just picked up a SLF distress call on guard for the Korgar. Request mission tasking to respond. The reply was swift and cold. Hammer 0 to 1, disregard. That area is not in our area of operations. No tasking is authorized. Maintain alert status. Disregard? Ops, that's an American voice calling abandoned. Say again, request tasking. Hammer 0 to 1, the order is to disregard. There's no authorized activity in that grid. Do you copy? The tone was final, leaving no room for debate. It was an order, a direct, unambiguous order to ignore a fellow soldier's plea for help. Buzzer stared at the map, at the plotted coordinates. He looked at the photograph taped next to his screen, a picture of his younger brother, an army infantryman. The voice on the guard channel came again, weaker now. Is anyone out there? For God's sake, Buzzer made his choice. He wasn't just choosing to fly. He was choosing to end his career and possibly face a court-martial. He grabbed his helmet. Start the pre-flight, he said to the stunned airman outside. I'm going. The two massive TF-34 engines of the A-10 Thunderbolt II whined to life with a sound that was less a roar and more a deep, industrial groan. Inside the cockpit, Major Tom Buzzer worked through his startup checks with a methodical speed born of 1,000 repetitions. His mind, however, was a storm. The words, "You are hereby disobeying a direct order," played on a loop, competing with the fading echo of the SEAL's voice on the guard channel. He pushed the throttle forward, and the ungainly aircraft, laden with bombs, missiles, and a full drum of 30mm ammunition, began to roll. As his wheels left the tarmac of Kandahar, he was officially a rogue asset. He switched his primary radio to the mission frequency, but kept the guard channel open in his helmet. He called to the Airborne Warning and Control System, AWACS, aircraft, a Boeing E-3 Sentry that served as the sky's traffic controller and command post. Darkstar, this is Hammer 0 to 1, off standby, proceeding northeast to investigate possible troops in contact at Grid 42S. There's a long pause, filled with hiss. Then, the AWACS controller's voice, clipped and professional. Hammer 0 to 1, Darkstar. Your flight plan is not recognized. Be advised, you're deviating from assigned alert posture. Return to station immediately. Buzzer took a breath. Darkstar, I have a verified distress call from USSOF on guard frequency, requesting clearance to provide close air support. Hammer 0 to 1, that request is denied. We show no friendly forces in that grid. You are ordered to return to Kandahar. Acknowledge. This was the next layer of the wall. AWACS was the eye of the command structure. Their denial meant the abandonment of the SEAL team was not a local TOC mistake. It was a coordinated, deliberate act up the chain. Buzzer felt a cold clarity. Darkstar, I am declaring an emergency. I have a humanitarian imperative. I am proceeding to the coordinates. Hammer 0 to 1, you are in violation of... Buzzer gently turned down the volume on that radio. He was now a ghost, a blip on their screen, moving in the wrong direction. He was alone, on the ridge. The situation had descended into a grim, close-quarters nightmare. Riggins and Abe had managed to pull Diaz and Connors into a shallow depression behind a rock wall. It was a tomb with a view. The insurgents, emboldened by the lack of response to the SEAL's calls, were moving in. They were close enough that Riggins could see the shapes of their pay-call hats against the pre-dawn gloom. He and Abe fired in short, disciplined bursts, conserving their last rounds. Each shot was a prayer. Diaz was unconscious, his tourniquet dark and soaked. Connors was fighting shock, his hands trembling. Riggins tried the satellite radio one last time. The TOC answered. Anvil 1, be advised, extraction is not feasible due to escalating threat environment. You are to execute evasion and recovery plan. Evasion and recovery. On an open ridge, surrounded, with 2 critically wounded men. It was a death sentence with a fancy name. Riggins didn't even bother to reply. He switched back to the guard channel, his voice a dry whisper. If anyone can hear this, we're making our last stand. Tell our families, tell them we called for help. He dropped the handset, picked up his rifle, and prepared to sell their lives as dearly as possible. Abe looked at him. No angels coming, brother. Riggins shook his head. No angels. Buzzer pushed the Warthog as hard as he could. The plane was not built for speed. It was built for survival. Its cockpit was a titanium bathtub that could withstand direct hits from heavy-caliber weapons. He flew low, using terrain masking, tried to stay off radar as much as possible. The journey felt like an eternity. On his map display, the distance to the coordinates ticked down with agonizing slowness. He was monitoring the guard channel when he heard the final, whispered transmission from Anvil 1. Last stand. A fire ignited in Buzzer's chest. He wasn't too late. He couldn't be. He thumbed the radio, broadcasting on the same open guard frequency, his voice cutting through the static. Anvil 1, this is Hammer 0 to 1, U.S. Air Force A-10. I read you. I'm 10 minutes out. You are not alone. Repeat, you are not alone. Mark your position. I need a mark. On the ridge, Riggins and Abe stared at each other. The voice from the sky was so unexpected, so impossible, that for a second they thought it was a hallucination born of blood loss and despair. Then it came again. Anvil 1, this is Hammer 0 to 1. Do you have a mark for me? Riggins fumbled for his infrared strobe, a small device that put out a beam of light visible only through night vision. His hands are numb with cold and fatigue. He turned it on, placing it on the highest rock near them. Hammer 0 to 1, Anvil 1. IR strobe active. We are in a shallow depression west of the strobe. Enemy is 50 meters north, east, and south. They are all around us. Copy, Anvil 1. I have your strobe. I see the ridge. Hold tight. Keep your heads down. I'm coming in hot. The first thing the insurgents heard was a low, growling rumble in the distance, like approaching thunder. They paused, looking up. The sky was beginning to lighten to a deep purple. Then they saw it, a dark, twin-tailed shape, moving slower than any jet they'd ever seen, emerging from the valley below. It was so low it seemed to scrape the mountains. Buzzer saw the ridge through his targeting pod, a camera system that magnified the battlefield. He saw the single, blinking IR strobe, a tiny heartbeat of light. Then he saw the heat signatures, dozens of them, closing in on that tiny point of light. Rage, clean, and focus replaces anxiety. He was here for one thing. Anvil 1, Hammer. I'm in. Gun run on the north side. Danger close. Danger close meant the ordnance would be falling devastatingly near to friendly positions. Buzzer banked the aircraft, lining up for his signature move, the gun run. He toggled the master arm switch to on. In the belly of the plane, the massive GU-8 cannon began to spin up. He dipped the nose, putting the pipper, the targeting reticule, on the cluster of heat signatures north of the strobe. At less than a mile out, he squeezed the trigger on his stick. The sound was not a gunshot. It was the ripping apart of the fabric of the world. BRRRT. A sustained 3-second burst. From the ground, it looked like a fiery laser beam from the nose of the aircraft, striking the mountain. The earth itself seemed to erupt. Rocks, dirt, and bodies were thrown into the air. The torrent of 30mm rounds, each as big as a bottle, chewed through the insurgent position, obliterating it. The shockwave hit the SEAL's position, a physical punch of air and noise. Rocks and debris rained down around them. It was the most beautiful, terrifying sound Riggins had ever heard. Splash north. Buzzer's voice came, calm as if he were ordering coffee. Switching to east, he pulled the Warthog into a steep, climbing turn, its wings groaning under the stress. The insurgents, now in a panic, scrambled for cover. Their moment of triumph had been replaced by a primal fear. The angel of death had arrived, and it was uglier than they could have ever imagined. The echo of the 30mm cannon's barrage was still rolling across the valleys as Buzzer hauled the A-10 into a tight, climbing left turn. G-forces pressed him into his seat. He could see the chaos below through his canopy, figures scattering from the smoking ruin that was the north side of the ridge. But the targeting pod on his nose gave him a god's-eye view, magnified and coldly precise. The east side insurgents, those who had survived the initial shock, were now firing every weapon they had skyward, a futile spray of PCAM, AK-47, and even RPG tracers arcing towards him. To Buzzer, they looked like angry fireflies. The A-10 was built to absorb that kind of punishment. Anvil 1, hammer. East side this pass. Still danger close. His voice was flat, all business, the voice of a workman about to demolish a wall. On the ground, Riggins was yelling at Abe to get low. The world had narrowed to the roar of the jet, and the concussive hell Buzzer was unleashing. As the Warthog lined up again, its distinct silhouette backlit by the rising dawn, a new sound joined the fray, the high-pitched scream of an incoming rocket-propelled grenade. An insurgent, braver or more desperate than the rest, had taken a shot. Buzzer saw the RPG's smoke trail lancing up from a cluster of rocks. He didn't flinch. He made a minute adjustment with his thumb on the throttles, nudging the aircraft slightly. The RPG passed harmlessly, maybe 20 feet below his left wing. "Nice try," he muttered, and squeezed the trigger. Another earth-shattering burst from the GU-8 cannon tore into the east side position. The rocks where the RPG had been fired from vanished in a cloud of pulverized stone and dust. The return fire from that sector ceased abruptly. But the battle wasn't won. The south side enemy, now understanding the pattern, began to retreat down the slope, seeking cover in a network of deeper gullies and caves. They were scattering, which was both good and bad. Good because the immediate pressure on the SEALs was lessening. Bad because a dispersed enemy was harder to kill with a strafing run. Buzzer saw this on his screen. He needed to keep them running, to break their will completely. He selected a different weapon. Anvil 1, switching to Willie Pete. "Mark your position again, confirm strobe." Willie Pete was military slang for white phosphorus rockets. Marker rounds that created a massive, burning smoke screen, but in this context they were terror weapons. "Strobe is still active, hammer." Riggins confirmed, his voice alive with a hope he thought was dead. Buzzer fired a pair of rockets from his left wing pod. They streaked down and impacted just beyond the fleeing southside insurgents. Two enormous, blindingly bright clouds of burning white smoke erupted, cutting off their retreat and showering the area with searing chemical fire. The screams that carried up the ridge were thin and distant. For the first time in hours, a semblance of quiet fell over the SEAL's position. The gunfire had stopped. The only sound were the moan of the wind, the fading rumble of the A-10's engines as it circled wide, and Diaz's ragged breathing. The sky was now a pale gray-blue. They were alive. But Buzzer's problems were just beginning. As he leveled out from his rocket run, his headset exploded with voices. The AWACS, Dark Star, was no longer politely ordering him back. They were furious. "Hammer 0 to 1. You have engaged in an unauthorized firefight in a restricted grid. You are to cease hostilities immediately and return to base. Acknowledge." Then, a new, colder voice cut in. It was the voice of the Air Component Commander, a one-star general back in Qatar. "Major, this is General Reed. You have violated direct orders and commenced an unapproved engagement. You're to break off now. That is a direct order from your theater commander. Do you understand the consequences?" Buzzer looked down at the ridge. The IR strobe still blinked, a lonely, brave heartbeat. He saw the 4 heat signatures clustered together, one very faint Diaz, another fading Connors. He saw the burning white smoke of his rockets. He saw the dozens of other heat signatures, some still, some crawling away. He thought of the voice on the radio. "We are being abandoned." He keyed his mic, "Dark Star, hammer 0 to 1. I have 4 American SOF, 2 critical, surrounded by hostile force. I am providing close air support as per the rules of engagement and the inherent right of self-defense. I cannot break off until the threat is neutralized and a medevac is inbound." There was a sputter of incredulous static. The general's voice came back, icy. "Major, there is no medevac coming. There is no official activity in that grid. You are expending ordnance on a phantom mission. Turn around now." The statement hung in the air, A monstrous admission. No medevac coming. The command was willing to let him fly away and let the SEALs bleed out, completing the cover-up. Buzzer felt a profound detachment. His career was over. His freedom might be next. But in this moment, he held the power. "Sir," Buzzer said, his tone respectful but unyielding. "With all due respect, I have eyes on. The men on the ground are not phantoms. The enemy is not a phantom. I will not leave them. You can court-martial me when I land." He switched frequencies, ignoring the squawking that followed. He needed to get the SEALs out. He called on a dedicated search and rescue frequency, one used by the brave crews of the Pave Hawk helicopters. Any SAR, this is Hammer 0 to 1. I have an urgent, priority 1 case vac. 4 SOF, 2 urgent surgical, location to Korgar. I have suppressed the immediate area, but need extraction now. Can anyone assist? The response was not from a helicopter. It was from a distant AC-130U spooky gunship, orbiting another operation 50 miles away. The pilot's voice was a slow, southern drawl. "Hammer, this is Spectre 2 to 1. We copy your traffic. We are otherwise engaged, but we hear you." There was a pause, as if the Spectre crew was having their own hushed argument. Then the voice returned lower. "Hammer, we just got the stand-down order for your grid. We cannot move. I'm sorry, brother." The wall was complete. Not even the legendary Spectre, the ultimate guardian angel for troops in contact, was allowed to help. Buzzer was truly alone. He had his plane, his guns, and about 20 minutes of fuel before he'd have to leave to avoid crashing. He looked at his remaining ordnance. A few more rockets, a pair of 500-pound bombs, and a full lot of 30 millimeters. He clicked back to the SEAL's frequency. "Anvil 1, Hammer. Talk to me. What's your status? And be honest. The cavalry, the official cavalry, isn't coming." Riggins' voice was tired but clear. "Hammer, Diaz is fading fast. Connors is stable, but out of the fight. We have maybe 1 mag each left. They're scattered, but they're still out there. If you leave, they'll regroup." Buzzer made another decision. If he couldn't get them a ride out, he would make the mountains so untenable for the enemy that the SEALs might have a chance to escape on foot. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. "Okay, listen up," Buzzer said, his mind racing. "I'm going to make some noise on the southern escape routes. Then, I'm going to put my last bombs on the main approach gully. After that, you need to move. Can you move?" Riggins looked at his team. Diaz was unconscious. Connors could maybe hobble with support. Abe was battered, but whole. "We can move," he lied. "Give us the signal." The fuel gauge on Buzzer's panel was no longer a number. It was a countdown timer to failure. He had pushed the Warthog to its limits, and the thirsty engines had gulped down the JP-8. He had maybe 15 minutes of effective loiter time before he'd be forced to turn for Kandahar, and even that would be cutting it dangerously close. "Anvil 1, execute my plan on the next run. Get ready to move south by southeast, towards the wadi I'm about to clear. Do you copy?" "Copy, Hammer," Riggins said. He and Abe were already tying a makeshift drag harness out of webbing for Diaz. Connors, pale and sweating, tested his weight on his good leg, rifle in hand. It was a pitiful exodus, but it was all they had. Buzzer banked hard, lining up for a run in the southern gullies where the surviving insurgents had fled. He wasn't trying for precise kills now. He was trying for apocalyptic noise and spectacle. He selected his last 2 rockets and fired them into the narrowest part of the main gully. They exploded with deafening, concussive booms, sending plumes of rock and smoke hundreds of feet into the air. The message was clear: this path is death. Then, he turned his attention to the primary approach route, a wider gully to the northeast where reinforcements would most likely come from. He toggled his weapon select to the pair of 500-pound GPS-guided bombs hanging under his wings. "Anvil 1, Hammer. Big noise on the main avenue. Then you run." He entered the coordinates for the head of the gully into his system. A tinny, automated voice in his helmet confirmed, "GPS locked." He pickled the release button. 2 sleek shapes fell away from his wings, their small guidance fins adjusting with tiny puffs. For a few seconds, there was an eerie silence. Then, the mountain itself seemed to shudder. 2 colossal, simultaneous eruptions of fire and dirt bloomed at the distant end of the gully. The shockwave hit the ridge seconds later, a rolling thunder that felt like a physical blow. When the dust settled, a small landslide had been triggered, partially blocking the route. It wouldn't stop a determined force forever, but it would slow them down for crucial hours. "Time to go. Go now." Buzzer's voice crackled. Riggins and Abe hauled Diaz up, each taking an arm over their shoulders. Connors limped ahead, his rifle scanning the broken ground. They stumbled out of their shallow depression, leaving behind a landscape of spent brass, blood, and scorched earth. They moved like ghosts, downhill towards the smoking gully Buzzer had just rocketed. Buzzer watched their 4 tiny heat signatures begin their agonizingly slow crawl across his screen. They were exposed. If even a handful of insurgents had held their nerve and were watching, it would be a shooting gallery. He still had his gun. He began a wide, low orbit around their movement, a predatory hawk circling its wounded chicks. His eyes were glued to the targeting pod, scanning every rock, every shadow for a threat. It was then that his radio hissed with a new, unfamiliar voice. It was weak, broken with static, speaking in Pashto. Then, another voice answered. They were using cheap commercial walkie-talkies, their frequency bleeding into the military band. Buzzer didn't speak Pashto, but the tone was unmistakable, urgent, angry, coordinating. They had seen the SEALs move. They were regrouping. A heat signature appeared from behind a large boulder halfway between the SEALs and the gully. One, then 2 more. They were setting up an ambush. Envel 1, stop. Freeze. Buzzer yelled. Ambush, you're 2 o'clock, 150 meters. Get down. The SEALs dropped instantly, dragging Diaz into a shallow ditch. A burst of automatic fire kicked up dirt 10 feet in front of them. They were pinned again. Buzzer didn't hesitate. He didn't have bombs or rockets left. All he had was the gun. But the geometry was a nightmare. The insurgents were almost in a direct line between the circling plane and the SEALs. A strafing run risked hitting his own men. The margin of error was 0. Envel 1, I'm coming in. This will be danger close. I'm in on top of you. Dig in if you can. He pulled the Warthog into a tight, screaming turn, lining up on a vector that was terrifyingly close to the SEAL's position. He had to angle the run so the line of his cannon fire would pass just in front of the ditch. He adjusted the pipper, his entire world narrowing to the glowing screen and the calculations of speed, angle, and bullet drop. His mouth was dry. Hammer, we're down. Do what you have to do, Riggins said, his voice steady. He threw his body over Diaz's. The familiar, bone-deep growl of the A-10 filled the sky again. Buzzer squeezed the trigger. BRRRT. A 2-second burst. From the ground, it looked and sounded like the end of the world passing just overhead. The stream of 30mm rounds walked up the gully, precisely where the 3 insurgent heat signatures had been. The rocks they were using for cover disappeared in a cloud of pulverized debris. When it cleared, no movement registered on Buzzer's screen. Ambush neutralized. Move. Now. Fast as you can. The SEAL scrambled up and ran, a hobbling, desperate sprint. Buzzer continued his orbit, a menacing presence keeping the skies clear. He saw no more immediate threats, but his fuel warning light now blinked a persistent, angry yellow. He was past bingo fuel, the point needed for a safe return. He was now on borrowed time, burning the fuel reserves meant for emergencies. Envel 1, I have to leave soon. You need to get to that wadi and find cover. A real medevac is not coming. You understand? We understand, Riggins panted, the gully finally within reach. Whoever you are, we owe you our lives. Just get home, Buzzer said. He took one last look at the 4 figures disappearing into the deep, shadowy cut of the wadi. It was the best he could do. With a deep ache in his chest, he turned the Warthog southwest, towards Kandahar and whatever awaited him there. The mountain ridge receded behind him, quiet now except for the wind and the cries of the wounded. As he climbed to a more fuel-efficient altitude, the radios erupted. AWACS, the general, his own wing command, all demanding explanations, issuing threats. He silenced them all. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his actions. He was no longer a pilot. He was a defendant. He thought of the faces he'd never seen in that ditch, the voices on the radio. He hoped it was enough. The landing gear of the A-10 screeched as it kissed the Kandahar tarmac, a jarring return to a reality that now felt alien. Buzzer taxied his Warthog, not to its usual alert hangar, but to an isolated revetment where a grim reception committee waited. 2 staff cars, a security Humvee, and 3 stone-faced officers, one with the silver eagle of a colonel on his cap. The engines whined down into silence, a sound that felt like a last sigh. As he popped the canopy, the desert heat rushed in, but It did nothing to melt the ice in his gut. He was met not by his crew chief, but by the colonel and a master sergeant from the Office of Special Investigations, OSI. "Major," the colonel said, his voice devoid of emotion, "you will come with us. Now, do not speak to anyone." They escorted him directly to a secure briefing room. There was no debrief, no after-action report. There was an interrogation. For 6 hours, under the glare of fluorescent lights, they questioned him. Why did he disobey a direct order? Who authorized him to fly to that grid? What intelligence did he have that overrode command judgment? Was he in contact with the ground team prior to the incident? The implication was clear. They were constructing a narrative where he was a loose cannon, perhaps even coordinating with the SEALs on an unauthorized op buzzer, answered every question the same way. "I heard a distress call on the guard frequency from American personnel. I rendered assistance pursuant to the rules of engagement and the law of armed conflict. I identified a clear and immediate threat to American lives and acted to neutralize it." They presented him with a written statement to sign. It outlined his unauthorized departure, reckless expenditure of ordnance, and willful violation of the chain of command. It made no mention of a SEAL team. He refused to sign it. At the end of the marathon session, the colonel stood. "Major, you are relieved of flight status. You are confined to base pending a general court-martial. Your security clearance is suspended. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." He was driven to his quarters, which felt more like a cell. The word had spread in that mysterious way it does on military bases. Men he'd flown with for years avoided his eyes. He was a pariah, a virus of disobedience. He sat on his bunk, staring at the wall. He had saved 4 men, but in doing so, he had ended his own life. He wondered if they had made it out of the wadi. They had. The gamble worked. The combination of buzzers punishing strikes and the blocked routes had shattered the insurgents' morale and capability. Riggins and Abe, through sheer force of will, dragged Diaz and Connors for 3 miles through the treacherous wadi. Using a surviving handheld radio on a different, obscure special operations frequency, Riggins managed to reach a distant Marine patrol. He didn't identify his unit or his mission. He simply gave their coordinates and said for U.S. casualties. The Marines, to their eternal credit, didn't ask questions. They rolled out in wraps, fought through a minor skirmish, and pulled the shattered SEAL team to safety. Diaz and Connors were flown to Bagram, then to Germany. They would survive. Back at their Naval Special Warfare headquarters, the story of the Phantom A-10 became a quiet legend. But when their commanding officers tried to file the official after-action report, praising the unsanctioned but heroic air support, it was buried. A senior officer from the Joint Chiefs visited. He told them, in no uncertain terms, that the incident at Takurgar was a classified, compartmentalized operation that had gone off script. To speak of it would be a breach of national security. The SEALs were silenced with threats of courts-martial of their own. But whispers have a way of escaping. A crew chief on the Pavehawk frequency had heard Buzzer's desperate call for a medevac. The AC-130 crew had heard the stand-down order. A sergeant in AWACS had seen the radar track of a lone A-10 holding over a ridge for an hour. These fragments of truth traveled through the ranks, from mouth to ear, in gyms and chow halls across Afghanistan. 3 weeks after the incident, a reporter from a major news outlet, tipped off by a retired special operations medic, started asking questions about an abandoned SEAL team and a pilot who went rogue. The Pentagon's press office issued a flat denial. No such operation occurred. All air support missions are fully coordinated through the chain of command. The story might have died there, suffocated under layers of official secrecy, if not for Riggins. Once medically cleared, he requested a meeting with a Navy captain known for his integrity. In a closed room, with no notes taken, he told the full story. He played a scratchy, encrypted digital recording he'd made on his satellite radio. The captain listened to the chilling exchange with the TOC, the plea on the guard channel, and the calm, professional voice of Hammer answering the call. He heard the fear, the betrayal, and the salvation. The captain took the recording up his own chain, outside the usual channels, to a retired 4-star admiral with immense moral authority. That admiral made a phone call to a sitting United States senator on the Armed Services Committee. The pressure became too great. The official story began to crack. Faced with the possibility of a congressional hearing, the Department of Defense quietly announced an internal review of close air support procedures in Afghanistan. Buzzer's court-martial was postponed, then postponed again. The charges were slowly, quietly downgraded from willful disobedience to procedural deviations. 6 months after he'd taken off from Kandahar, he was offered a deal, resign his commission with an honorable discharge, and all charges would